Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be talking about books that I love that everyone else seems to hate. So stick around to hear my unpopular book opinions. Alright guys, so I was inspired to do this series by Elliott Brooks. She did a very similar series. I think she had 3 videos where she compared her tastes to Goodreads ratings, and I thought that was really cool and I wanted to try it. Once again, her content is phenomenal. Definitely check her out. Link down below. So good. She primarily reads fantasy and adult fantasy. So she considered a high rating, 4.25 and above. Most of these books are romance fantasy, YA fantasy, and I feel like they tend to rate a little bit lower. So I'm going to consider a high rating anything over 4. So for this, all of the books on this list rated under 4 on Goodreads, which is just so sad because I love these books so much and I don't understand why they don't have higher ratings. So if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Thursday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit the notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can check out my Instagram, it is linked down in the description below. With that being said, let's talk about these books. Alright, I'm going to start off with YA fantasy and romance fantasy. So the first book on this list, I was in shock when I saw the Goodreads rating, and that is The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh. This had like 3.6 on Goodreads, and I can't believe it. I love this book so much. It follows a girl who ends up traveling to New Orleans to start a new life, and she ends up kind of colluding with a bunch of miscreants, and one of them happens to be a vampire, and the story goes from there. I love the New Orleans setting and the world building and the magic, and it has a slow burn romance that I was hooked on, and the second book, The Damned, was just as good. I highly recommend picking this up. I think because it came out at a time where vampire romance is a little bit looked down upon just because of Twilight, that it didn't get the attention it deserves. And give it attention. It's a really good book and I really enjoyed it, so I highly recommend. And I think the new book, I forget the name of it, I'll leave it on the screen, is coming out in December, so perfect time to binge the first 2. Next up is a book I talked about in either my July or June wrap-up, and I loved it, and that is For the Wolf, and this is by Hanna Whitten. So this story follows a girl, and she is the second-born daughter to the crown. So the first-born daughter is for the crown, the second-born is for the wolf. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I thought it was a Red Riding Hood retelling, but it's very much not. And the forest setting in this is awesome. It's so cool. It's this like evil, malevolent forest that is killing all of these people, and it is described absolutely beautifully. There's also this really cool slow burn romance that I really adored and was really into, and it also had a lot of like politicking and stuff that happens in more adult fantasy novels. I think it's the best of both worlds. I think Elliott Brooks also had this book on her rated low books, just because I feel like there's so many people who would appreciate this book, me being one of them, and I highly suggest checking it out, especially if you're a fan of Beauty and the Beast retellings like ACOTAR, but you want more of a immersive and like a darker setting. So good. Please check this out. And next up is a book that I think I talked about, and I wasn't a huge fan of it, but I did very much enjoy it, and I was so surprised it had such a low score. And that is Where Dreams Descend by Janella Engels. This follows a magician who is super strong, and she wants to participate in a contest known as, I think, Spectacular, and the entire city sends all of their very strong magicians to participate, and her ringmaster, maybe? I might be wrong. The person who taught her everything she knows is very much against her going, but she sneaks out one day and does it anyway. And then she meets a judge and they form a little bit of a relationship. I think this might end up being a love triangle, but I very much enjoyed it. I think it does have some of its flaws. There were some problems with transitions similar to Kerri Maniscalco's writing, and I kind of wish the world had been developed just a little bit more and the magic system, but I love the story and I love the characters, and I was just so surprised it had like a 3.7. And this is another one that's very good if you want to read it now, because I think the next book is coming out in mid-October, so definitely check this out. It's really good. And speaking about Kerri Maniscalco, how does Stalking Jack the Ripper not have 4 stars on Goodreads? I mean, it's really close. It's at like 3.9, But this book was great. I loved it. It follows a girl who wants to be, I think, like a mortician, which is very much looked down on in society. And then these people end up being killed, and she's trying to solve the crime. And I was actually very shocked by the ending. I think the author did a very good job of making you think or suspect a lot of different people. And I really love this, especially the first one. As the series progressed, I've only read the second one in the series, and then I kind of got bored. I don't think it's that amazing, but definitely this first one deserves 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. Check this out, especially if you like kind of like a true crime / fantasy. It's really good. The next book I've actually talked a lot about on my channel because I know it's underrated and I feel like more people need to give it a chance. It's very original, and that is Girl, Serpent, Thorn by Melissa Bashardoust. I think this is sitting at like 3.7 on Goodreads, and it's really good. And it follows this girl who is cursed with her touch is poisonous, and on her twin brother's, I think, wedding or coronation, she decides enough is enough, and she's gonna try to break this curse. So she goes and teams up with like a demon type character who is in the dungeons and she thinks might know how to break the curse. Also, there's a guard there who might know more than he should, and it goes from there. And I really loved this book. It was very fun, very fairy tale-esque, and I think it deserves more than a 3.7. All right, moving into romance. There was only one on this list, and it was rated a 3.8, but I really think it deserves to be a 4, mostly because it's the book that kind of got me back onto reading contemporary romance, and that is Well Met by Jen Deluca. This is a romance that's set at a Renaissance fair where this girl moves in with her sister to take care of her, ends up having to join the Renaissance fair to be with her niece, and she meets this cranky guy that's in charge of it, and they form this relationship. And it's really good, and it's the perfect summer romance, and I highly suggest checking this out. I don't think it's cut to black, so there are some steamy scenes, and it is also very emotional. Like, this girl has ended up uprooting her life just to take care of her sister, and her life wasn't going too well before that. It's very good. I really enjoyed it. Please read it if you want a nice summer romance. All right, moving into thrillers and horror. So the first one of these might actually end up hitting 4 by the time this video comes out, but currently it's at 3.99, which honestly, it should be higher than that. I think this should be at like 4.5. This is why I don't rate books, because I'm terrible at it. But I really enjoyed this book. It was so good. I read it in a day and a half. It's gonna be featured in my August wrap-up, and that is Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. So I think this takes place in like 2022 or like in the future. And this team goes out to do a mockumentary, and they're trying to discover mermaids. And when they go out, the entire crew ends up being killed. So a new team is formed to go out to figure out what happened to the original group. And it's comprised of all of these different characters that have very unique personalities that were very well fleshed out. I was very impressed. And it's so good. It's like watching a horror movie play out. It's also very dark, very scary. I read a little bit of this when my husband wasn't home and I was terrified. And it's so cool. I'm gonna be terrified of the ocean for a while after reading this, but definitely check this out. This is also the perfect summer horror book. Read it. It's really, really good. The next 2 horror books are both at 3.6, and I think that's insane because they're probably one of my 2 favorite horror books. The first one is one that gets a lot of mixed feelings on, and I can kind of see why, and that's Babyteeth by Zoje Stage. And this follows a mother who is having a hard time with her daughter. Her daughter has selective mutism and is just kind of making the mother's life hell, and no one really believes her. So her husband isn't very supportive and just thinks that her daughter is an angel and would never do the things the mother is saying. And the mother also suffers from a chronic illness, which is also described very well. And I really enjoyed this book. I've actually reread this book twice, and I'm not someone who typically rereads thrillers. It gives you a lot to think about, and it's also super creepy. And the ending could go different ways. I don't know. I really love this. I thought there was going to be more. Like, I thought this was going to end up being a series, and I'm kind of bummed that it's only 1 book. But I think it deserves more love than a 3.6. Highly, highly recommend. And next up, if you saw my Summerween vlog, you'll know that I love this book, although I'm terrible at describing it. And that is Horrorstor by Grady Hendrix. So this follows a girl that is working at an IKEA type store, and her store is being vandalized. So the manager asks her and a group of other people to spend the night to figure out what's actually going on, and then shit hits the fan, and it goes from there. and it's so, so good. And I love Grady Hendrix' like comedic style of horror and the graphic imagery in this. Like there are scenes that are burned into my mind forever that are just disgusting and disturbing, but that's what you want in a horror book. And I feel like it's done so well. This deserves so much more than a 3.6. I really enjoyed it, especially since I've read Grady Hendrix' newest book, Final Girls, or the Final Girl Support Group, and I wasn't so crazy about it, and I think it's rated higher than Horrorstor. And that's just a travesty. It should not be rated higher. But anyway, highly suggest you check this out if you like horror books. And last up, we have Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. I think this is rated at a 3.7, and this book was so creepy. I really suggest you read it this fall. It has the perfect like spooky imagery, and it follows a woman who ends up going to check on her, I believe it's her cousin, who has been married to this rich man, and she hasn't seen her since, and she's very concerned because her cousin sends her a letter and is like, help me, something, something. Anyway, very worried, goes to check on her cousin, and then things progress from there. There's a very creepy manor, there's this creepy house, and it's done very well. The pacing is kind of off the charts because it starts off very like slow and like it's Gothic horror. So like just eerie and creepy, and then like the final few chapters, you're just like, what in the hell is this book? But it's so good. So please check out Mexican Gothic. Also, if you're a fan of horror, it deserves more hype than it gets. All right, guys, that's it. Thank you so much for letting me talk about my underrated books. Let me know in the comments what your opinions are. Do you agree with me? Do you think these books are underhyped and deserve more love? Or do you hate them and I'm completely wrong? I would love to hear your comments. Like I said, I post videos every Thursday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye.